What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning back in. Today I'm going to start a short video series to show you how to create your own developer console for Unity. What this means is that if you've ever played a game like, let's say, Counter-Strike, and you hit the backquote button, or the squiggly line button as I call it, or the button that you don't know what the name is of it, and it's next to the number 1, you notice a window pops up, and you can start seeing a lot of commands, a lot of settings, a lot of logs, a lot of things are going through this console. The purpose of this is so that you are able to see any of the developer stuff or any of the logs that you need to look at that you would not normally be able to look at inside the game. For example, in Unity here, if you run the game, you have this little console right here, and if there's any Unity errors or anything that you send to debug.log, it's all put here. So I'm going to show you in hopefully just a few videos how to create your own console with your own commands, how to hook the Unity logs into it, and then how to make sure it's running on your build. So let's go ahead and get started. So I've already created the UI console window for you. I'm not going to go over how to make a scroll rect and whatnot with you this because I just want to save time, but I'll go over the basics with you right now. If you're not sure how to create this window, download the Git repo and just delete the scripts, remove the scripts from the developer console object, and just follow along, starting with a console that I've made for you. So basically I have an empty game object, I put a canvas on it, and inside that canvas I have my panel, and I have a scroll view, which is the window right here where all our logs are going to go, and I have the input field right here is where we're going to input our text. Very simple. So if I hit play right now, nothing's going to happen. You're just going to have this little window here. I'm typing, nothing's happening. But as you can see, the console's here, and the developer or the input is right here. Let me just turn off Steam real quick here. Sorry about that. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a couple scripts, and in this video we're gonna get our first command working. That is the goal. So let's begin. So obviously I have my scene saved to scenes, and I have a folder called scripts. So let's create 2 scripts. I'm gonna create my first one called developer console, and I think that is what I want to name it. So I'm going to just name it that. And then I'm going to create another script called, and I'm going to make this script hold my first command. And obviously the first command that we're going to want to test out is quitting the application because it's the easiest one to make. So I'm going to name it command quit. Pretty simple. Okay, so let's open up our developer console inside whatever IDE you're using. I'm using Visual Studio 2017. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to just make sure I'm zoomed in here for you. So the very first thing I'm going to do is tab that. I'm going to create a namespace, and I'm just going to call it console. And the reason why I'm creating this namespace is just so I don't have to include any usings at the top when I'm sharing the abstract console command class with everything else. So now I have this stuck in here. Let's do the basic setup for our developer console first. So I don't really need these functions yet. We'll just create them as we go along. I'm going to make our awake function, and I'm going to create a public static developer console instance. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want our developer console to be a static class. We only want one instantiation of it. We don't need 2. So if our instance is not equal to null, we're going to return. So don't do anything if we already have a console created. There's no reason why this should be called twice, but you should always have these checks in here to make sure. And then we should make our instance, equal to this. So now when the developer console wakes up, it's going to set itself as its own instance. Beautiful. So now what we should do is we should create our abstract class that's going to define our commands. So let's make a public abstract. Oh yeah, you can tell I haven't had my coffee yet. Class. And we're going to call it console command. Awesome. So we're going to need a few things in here. Pardon me. We're going to need a public abstract string name, and we're going to do a get and a protected set. So basically what I'm telling Unity right here is that publicly you can access the name, but if you want to actually change the name, it has to be done within console command, or since this is abstract, you won't do it here. It'll be done in whatever class inherits this. That's the only place you can actually set this. So let's copy this a few times, and let's name one to command. So everything's going to be saved as a string. Command is going to be the actual command that you type inside the console. Next, let's do a description. This is eventually going to be used for, let's say, if you use an extension or an argument called -- help after a command, and maybe we can have this description pop up. And lastly, help, a lovely little help text. Okay, and we're going to need a couple commands here. The first command we're going to have is we're going to basically have a command up here in the abstract class called add command to console. Every single command, we're going to have every single command call this from their constructor. And basically what it's going to do is once I've set it up in a developer console, it's going to actually add the command to the console for us. This is just doing it automatically, so we don't have to call anything. We don't have to create any game objects to hold the scripts. It's going to be very quick and very convenient. So that's going to stay empty for now. And we're going to do one last class. It's going to be abstract because we want every single inherited class of console command to run this. And it's going to be a void run command. Awesome. So this is the basic setup right here. So now that we have our console command defined, let's go back to the developer console. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to have something that's going to hold all our commands for us. So let's just use a dictionary for that because that is the easiest thing to do. So a public static dictionary. We're going to have a string as the key, and we're going to be using the name of the command as the key, and the console command itself. And we're just going to call this another get private set because we don't need anybody on the outside touching this. Awesome. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to our awake, and we're going to actually instantiate our command, and that is just going to be a new dictionary. This is why I love Visual Studio. It just pops these things up for you automatically. It makes the typing a lot easier. Pardon me. Okay, so now there's going to be a few things that we're going to want to add for our UI. So go up to the top and add Unity Engine using Unity Engine.ui. This is so that we can actually access a few of the UI components through the code. So let's make a header right here, and we're going to call this our UI components. And the reason why I'm putting this header in here is so that when we are actually looking at this script attached to something inside Unity, we're going to be able to see it in this nice little header already organized for us. So we're going to want a few things. First thing we're going to want is access to the canvas, and we're going to call it console canvas. The next thing we're going to want is our scroll rect. So what the scroll rect is inside the scroll view, this is what controls the movement up and down. The reason why we want access to this is because every time we add a command, we're going to want to force it to go to the bottom. So we're always going to want to scroll down. So you need access to this to do it. And we're going to call it just scroll rect. The next thing we're going to want is our public text console text. And we're going to want our public text input text. And the last thing we're going to want is our input field, which is where we're going to actually be typing our commands, and we're going to call it console input. Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to create our start function. And we're definitely going to put a capital right there, so it overrides the game object start function. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our console canvas, and we're going to make sure that the canvas is turned off by default. So we don't want this console to be showing. Now, the reason why I put it on an empty game object first is simply so I can call the console canvas, access this game object component, and say, hey, turn it off, set active to false. Make it really, really simple. Awesome. the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a little class here called create commands. Now, to keep this console as simple as possible, anytime you create a new command like command quit or however many commands you have, the only place you're going to want to call the creation of it is right here. This is it. We're going to put everything in create commands. So I'll show you how to do that once we've created the quit command. Okay, awesome. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a static call called add commands to console. So what this means is that it can be accessed from the console command class, and it's going to be a really easy call to see, hey, if this command's not already in the dictionary, we're going to add it to that dictionary. So let's do that. We're going to do a public static void add commands to console. Now we're going to need two things here. We're going to need the string, we're going to need the name, and we're going to need a console command. Now, whenever you're adding objects to a dictionary, you should always check to see if you should always check to see if the command exists inside the console already. Did I call this commands? Yeah, I did. Okay. Sorry about that. We want that to be called commands. So we're going to say, hey, if our commands contains are the key, whatever key you're passing. Sorry, what the exclamation mark means it doesn't contain. That means we're going to want to add our command. So let's do commands.add, and we're going to do our name and our command. Very simple. So if the command doesn't exist, add it to the commands. No problem. Pardon me. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create our update function again. This is where we're going to run the commands of the console. So when we click our back quote or squiggly line or whatever it is you've named this key, when you click it, it pops the console up. You can use any key that you want. You could bind it to the C key if you wanted to, but I like using the back quote because it's usually the button that's picked by most game developers. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, if our input dot get key down, and then Unity is going to ask us for a key code, so we're going to say, hey, key code, and then what this key is called in Unity is the back quote. So if we push our back quote, we're going to want to say, hey, let's take our game object and switch its set active to the opposite. So instead of saying, making a little if statement here saying that, hey, if our console's on, turn it off. If our console's off, turn it on. We're going to make it a little bit simpler here. We're going to access our game object, and we're going to set active to the opposite of whatever it's set to now. And you get that by saying console canvas, game object, and I believe it's active in hierarchy. Yes, there we go. So this returns a Boolean. If it's true, if it's active, it's false, if it's not active. And basically saying, I want to set the active to the opposite of that. So if this is on, turn it off. If this is off, turn it on. And this just saves you a little bit of typing. Okay, sweet. So the next command we're going to add after this is our return key. And what that is going to do is basically say, hey, if we have some text in the input, add a message to a console. But before we do that, let's go back to Unity and test this just to make sure this runs and make sure we haven't screwed anything up. And by we, I mean me. So let that compile for a second. Okay, so we're going to go to our developer console object. We're going to add our developer console. Now you're going to see that all these are empty right here. You're going to want to slowly drag these in. And I'll go over quickly the UI right now, how I've set it up, just so you understand what I'm doing. So we want an access to our canvas. Now, underneath the panel, which has our input, which is this, and our scroll view, which is this, we're going to want to take our, let's see what we got here. We want our scroll rect. So inside your scroll view, your viewport, your content, I believe it is right here under scroll view. So a scroll view has a scroll rect built into it. So we're going to go back to our canvas, or our object, sorry. We're going to drag our scroll rect right here. Now, when you create a scroll view by itself, it's going to look almost the same as what I have here, except for this little text right here. I added a text component to the content component. In order to get this to work properly, you have to add a vertical layout group with a little bit of padding make sure that your child control size and your force expand are set to what I have here. And then you add a text underneath with a layout element script, forcing a minimum height. Very simple. Make sure that your text is set to wrap and overflow. That's just so it doesn't stay on one line. It's so it prints nicely inside your console. Okay, so if we go back to this, we're going to want our console text, which is this guy right here. We're going to want our input field text, which is this guy right here. And we're going to want the actual input field right here. So now I have everything saved. The reason why I'm doing that is so I don't get any errors at runtime, because I haven't actually set any of these objects yet, but I just did so now. Save the scene, and let's run. So the console should turn off. Okay, now if I hit the back quote, awesome. We have our basic functionality. Cool. So let's go back to Visual Studio. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee, and we're going to keep going. Okay, so next, I'm going to still save the command for last. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to say we want to add some messages to the console. Now, we're going to want to have a class for inside developer console when we need to access it, and one for outside developer console. So what we're going to do is we're going to make another public void, and we're going to call it add message to console. This is going to be used for inside developer console class. I'm going to want to also create a public static void, and I'm going to say add static message to console. I can't name it the same thing because they both take the same amount of arguments, so Unity wouldn't know which one you're trying to call. So how we're going to do this is basically for adding the message to the console, we're going to say, hey, I want the console text dot text, and I want to add this message that we're sending to it, and I want to append a new line at the end. So basically it's going to take whatever message you send and print it and then slap a new line at the end for you. Pretty simple. Pardon me. Now here is where we access our scroll rect. So you're going to take your scroll rect right here, and it has a setting here called vertical normalized position. 1 is meaning the top, 0 is meaning the bottom. So if we set this to 0, basically what it's going to do is after we put our console text in, it's going to force the scroll rect to go to the bottom. If you put this to 0.5, it would force it to the middle, etc. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to, let me see here. So our public static add message to console. So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually access the console text and the scroll rect through the instance, the static instance, or it could actually literally have it call this this command here. But I'll do both ways just to show you how it works. So you're going to take your developer console, you're going to access your instance, and then you're going to take your console text, and you're going to do the exact same thing. So let me just copy this to make this a little bit faster. Instance, scroll rect, vertical normalized position. So these two things do the same thing. The reason why I have the static one here is so any other class that you make in your game that's completely unrelated to the console, all they have to do is call developer console, add static message to console, and bam, they can add a message to the console. The other thing we could do here is you could actually make this private now, because we don't need this outside of the developer console class because we have a public accessor to it right here. So we'll leave that here for now. I'll come back and I'll show you how to access this through this after. So the last thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to parse our input. And what that means is we're going to say, hey, okay, this is the input that the user has entered. So we need to split these strings up. We've got to see what's going on here. So this is a pretty easy class to create. Let's go private void parse input. Okay, so we're gonna create a temporary string array here called input, and we're gonna equal this to input.split. So null. So basically what this does is this separates our string by spaces. That's what this null input means. By default, split will split by the spaces unless you specify a character like a /, for example. We're just going to use null for now. So if our whoops, we're going to make an if statement here. Our input.length is equal to 0. Or for some reason, oh, whoops, I meant to put our input.length. Whoops. If our input.length is equal to 0, or for some reason, our input string is equal to null, which shouldn't happen, but you could have the check here just in case. We're going to add a message to the console, and we're going to say simply command not recognized. And then once we realize that the command's not recognized, we can just return out of here because we don't need to do anything else. Sorry, add command to console. Oh, I called it add message to console. Apologies. Okay, so now that we have that check out of the way, so what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, so our length isn't 0, so clearly this contains some sort of command. So we're going to say, hey, if our commands doesn't contain the key at the first input, so basically the first word you have before any spaces is going to be the command, and it's going to say, hey, if this isn't here, we're going to want to get we're not going to want to do anything. So how we're going to check that is simply oh, whoops, I deleted a bracket here. That was messing me up for a second. We're going to say add message to console, and we're going to say command not recognized, so we can just copy that. We don't have to return here because we're not going to have anything else past this for now in this video anyways. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically now, since our command is recognized, since we've made it past these two checks, we're going to call our actual command class and run the command. So let's do that here by calling commands. We're going to use the key, which is input 0, which we've now confirmed has the name of our command. Now we're going to run command. Awesome. So once again, it takes in the string that you type in, and after you hit enter, which we're going to put in right now, it's going to say, hey, we're going to split this string. It's going to say if the string is empty or it doesn't exist, command's not recognized. If you type in a command that's not inside the commands dictionary, the command is recognized, but if it is, let's run the command for now. In the next video, I'll show you how to add arguments to the command, but for now, we're going to do a basic no argument command. Okay, so the next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go to our update here, and we're going to add a check for seeing if the, let's see if we're active in the hierarchy. So if the console is open, this command is going to be relevant. If it's not, we're not even going to bother checking. So I don't want to hit the enter key when the console is not open and it runs commands for me. So let's do another input. Whoops. If input.get key down, and this time we're going to use key code return. So if we hit enter, the next thing we're going to check to see is, hey, is our input text empty? So if our input text is not equal to an empty string, we're going to add a message to the console, and what that's going to be is we're going to add our input text.text. Oh, sorry, I forgot to put that right here. We're just making sure that the input text, the actual text field is not empty. We're going to add that to the console, so whatever command you type in will be saved into the console, and then we're going to parse the input. Okay, awesome. So let's go back to Unity and make sure everything else is working. So let's hit play. Let's hit our console. Okay, sweet. Now, if I type in something and hit enter, we should see a command not recognized because we haven't added any commands yet. So let's say quit. We hit enter, quit is entered, and command not recognized pops up. And you can keep hitting enter, it's going to keep happening. Now let me hit this a few times just so you can see the scroll rect pushing down in action. So as you can see, every time you hit enter, this kind of bounces and it forces it down to the bottom. So that works pretty good. Let's stop that for now. Pardon me. So the last thing we're going to have to do here is we're going to actually have to create a command. So let's finish off our console command abstract class here first. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make a little string here called our add message. And basically what this is going to be is you're going to have a little message here saying that your command was added to the console properly. So leave a space at the beginning because the beginning of the sentence is going to come from the actual name of the command. So we're going to say command has been added to the console. Don't really need anything fancy here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to type in our developer console and we're going to add commands to console. We're going to pass in the command and we're going to say this, which is a reference to the inherited console command class. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to call our static message call, and we're going to use the name of the command, and we're going to add our add message. Very simple. The reason why I just put this out here is just so you can edit this here without touching it inside here. It just looks cleaner this way. That's all. This is just personal preference. You can literally just throw this in right here. This is just how I like to separate it. Okay. Now we can make our command. So let's go to our command quit that we created. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to add this to our console namespace. Go page down here. Okay, let's get rid of these spaces. So I don't really need any of these guys. I just need a couple inherited classes here. So we're going to change this from a model behavior to our console command because we wanted to inherit console command. Now it's saying, hey, we're missing a bunch of stuff here. So let's implement the abstract classes. So that doesn't look too pleasing on the eye. So let's go back here. Let's just copy these. And we're just gonna copy over these. And we're gonna replace abstract with override. Okay, awesome. So that made life much easier. So now we're going to create our constructor, which is public command quit. Now, I'm going to actually declare the name, command, description, and help all right here inside the constructor. If you want, once your game gets more complicated and more complex, you can actually pass them through the constructor if you want to declare them somewhere else, maybe from a file, or if you want to make it more ambiguous, you can do that. I'm just going to declare everything here just to make it super simple. So we're going to have our name. This is the quit command. The command itself is going to be quit, but in lowercase because we want it to be lowercase for all our commands. Description, we're going to say quits the application. You don't really have to put anything else there. And help. So what to do if they don't know how to use this command and help is called, we're going to say use this command with no arguments to force Unity to quit. Sweet. Now the last thing we want to do is inside the constructor, as we mentioned before, add the command to the console. Okay. Now there's one more thing that I want to do here. Inside the run command, we're actually going to have to make it quit the application. So normally you would do this with application.quit. Very simple. However, this doesn't work inside the actual, the Unity editor. So when this is run inside the Unity editor, nothing's going to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if our application is the editor, we're going to come back to that. If it's not, then hey, quit. So this is going to quit the build. How you quit the inside the Unity editor basically is you're going to say Unity editor. You're going to call the editor application. You're going to change the is playing to false. So you just have to switch that boolean off and Unity will turn it off for you. Now, to make adding commands easier to the console, every command we're going to have a static call. For example, let's do a public static command quit create command. Since this is a static command, I can't make this abstract, so we're going to have to remember to put this inside every single command that we create and name it specific to that command. So ours is command quit, so we're going to return a command quit here. We're going to have to remember just how we're going to have to remember add command to console. So there's only two things you have to do in here to make sure the command gets added properly. So all we want to do here is we want to return a new command quit. This is going to be the exact same across all commands that we create, just with the actual class name changed. So this is good to go here. Let's go back to the developer console. And now inside our create commands, we're going to say, we're going to call command quit. We have access to it because it's in the same namespace. Our command quit. And we're going to make that equal to command quit dot create command. So if you wanted to cache these commands for some reason, you can declare them up here and just then instantiate them here, but we don't really have to do that yet. So this line will suffice for now. So the last thing we need to do is we need to call our create commands function from the start function. Now when the game object starts up, it's going to create all the commands for you. We're going to do this in start, not awake, because not everything might be instantiated yet in awake. So you're going to want to do this in the start area. So let's go back to Unity. Now let's hit play. Hopefully we didn't mess anything up. So let's hit our console, and you're going to see quit command has been added to the console. So now that quit command is there. So let me type in a few fake commands to see make sure the command not recognized is still working. Command with a space, same thing. All right, let's type in quit. Look at that. It turned off the editor. Everything works just fine. But you know what? Let's hit Control-Shift-B and make sure your scene is added to the scenes inside the build. Let's build and run this real fast and make sure that this works inside our Unity build. So give this a second. Oh, Unity has 2 errors for the build. Uh-oh. I'm not sure what's happening here. Let's try that again. File, build settings. Let me maybe delete that scene, add open scenes, build. Windows build method, 2 exceptions. Well, this is an interesting error. Hopefully you guys don't get this too. Okay guys, sorry about that. I hadn't seen that error before, but I just had to look up in the documents real quick how to fix it. So if we go to our Visual Studio, what we're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to add this little line right here saying if Unity editor and then the end if right after this right here. For some reason, if you're trying to access the Unity editor namespace, sometimes it gives you errors, sometimes it doesn't. This is a bug right now. I'm using Unity Beta 2018, I believe. This is the only hacky way I know to fix it right now, but you can just do it this way. It's not going to affect your game at all. So put this in here, then we're going to go back to our Unity build, and now we're going to hit Control-Shift-B. Going to make sure your scene's here. You're going to do a build and run. You can save this somewhere. I already have a folder for it saved. Now we can see that it's building. Okay, so I'm just going to do this in a little windowed mode here. So now our build's running. Now hit the console button. Before I type in any commands, if for some reason that this window is pink or purple to you, you're encountering a little build bug that I'll teach you how to fix in 1 second. So right here, let's type in quit and see if the application closes. Awesome, it quit for us. Beautiful, that works just like we want to. Now, the last fix, like I said, if that window shows up pink or purple for you, what you have to do is you have to go to Edit, your project settings, and your graphics. For some reason, Unity is going to be replacing these, or your included shaders are going to be messed up somehow. So all you have to do is you have to go to your graphics settings, you right click, and you reset. Then once you build, that purple pink error is going to go away. Okay, awesome. So we fixed the bug of it not being able to find the Unity editor namespace, and we fixed the bug of the pink or purple screen. If you're getting it, one more time, hit play, console, quit. Awesome, it stops it for you. All right, guys, that was part 1. In the next part, we're going to add commands, arguments to our commands, and we're going to get the Unity debug log to actually spit out into here, which is going to be pretty cool. Okay, guys, thank you so much for tuning back in, and we'll see you next time.